Welcome to Sheree Clark's Talk Series for Midlife Women. I'm your host and midlife courage coach, Sheree Clark. Have you ever had a meaningful conversation with a good friend? One that made you actually begin to think differently? That's what I look to create in every segment of this series, a way to bring new ideas into focus. So let's get started with today's special guest. Maybe you're single right now because you've been burned in the past, or you keep picking unhealthy partners, or your romances always seem to fizzle out. Maybe the idea of dating again makes you want to eat carbs, or you're not seeing anyone because you're taking a breather to work on you. Whatever your reasons, if you're interested in or even mildly open to the idea of a new relationship, stay right here. Our guest today is love coach Bex Burton. She helps women attract and grow loving relationships with amazing partners. I love her tagline because it speaks to so many of us at this stage in our lives. The tagline is this: Bex helps independent women navigate modern dating to attract and grow lasting love without sacrificing who they are or what they want out of life. Mic drop, right? You mean I get to be loved for who I am authentically without losing myself in the process? And you'll help me get there? Hell yeah, Bex.
Here for it.
Bex, welcome.
Thank you, Sheree. It's so wonderful to be here. Hello, everybody listening. It's a great pleasure to be with you and share wisdom and love secrets with you.
Bex, what is the most important thing? Like, what is actually truly necessary when we really decide we want to attract lasting love?
Oh, well, Sheree, how much time have we got? I'm kidding. I know how much time we have, but that is a very big question. And there are a lot of ways that I can answer that. And I will answer it in the 5 core pillars that I work with. I work with a lot of like lists of, and one of the lists that I work with is these 5 core pillars that all healthy relationships need for success, for longevity. And that includes our romantic relationships. It also includes our other relationships, familial, platonic, even to some degree, career relationships. And I will give the caveat that that's not my expertise. And there are some vocations and professions that, these pillars may not apply if there are unhealthy working environments. So we'll just kind of stick with the theme of romantic relationship, but do know that these pillars apply in other areas of our life. But the very, very first thing, probably the most important thing, hands down, of all of these 5 pillars, number 1 is self-awareness. Self-awareness is key in having healthy, lasting, loving relationships with the people in our lives. Because if we are not aware of who we are, and I'll get into a little bit more about what we need to know about ourselves. If we're not aware of who we are and our tendencies, our patterns, then we are getting in our own way. Full stop. So self-awareness, when I talk about self-awareness, it encompasses a number of different things. It encompasses, at the very basic, our inner landscape of our emotional forecast. How am I feeling in this moment? And there are so many people on this planet, me included, who walk around disconnected from our emotional state. And that is for many different reasons. For me, as an example, my emotions were not something that was cultivated as a young person. So this comes into play in my adult relationship where I have this, this front where I might just be totally neutral, but there's a lot of inner turmoil going on that I'm not communicating because I'm not aware of it. And then my partner asks me, how are you doing? And I start crying because all of a sudden, well, now I'm starting to pay attention to it. So getting into a practice of being in touch with our emotional state at any given time is one of the keys to self-awareness. Being aware of our needs. I say that our feelings and our needs are very connected, because usually when we're having a complex or uncomfortable feeling, it's because a need is not being met. Conversely, if we're having a feeling of exuberance or joy or bliss or something like that, it's because a need is being met. So if we can use our feelings as messengers for our needs, then we can start to tap into what are the needs that we have in relationship. Self-awareness also encompasses our attachment style. I talk a lot about this in the work that I do. I won't go deeper into it right now, but there's about 4 different attachment styles. They develop in our early childhood. They come into play in our adult relationships. And this is one of the biggest drivers of division in our romantic relationship. So if you're not aware of your attachment style, there's lots of resources, myself included, that get into this topic. Being aware of our triggers and our wounds is another key piece of our self-awareness. So right now I'm kind of getting goosebumps because I know that I'm talking about the shadow self. The shadow self is the aspects of ourselves that we don't broadcast on social media, that we don't like to think or talk about, but these are the elements that get in our own way when we're talking about healthy romantic partnerships. And it's not that there's anything wrong with you, because we all have a shadow self. We all have attachment style. We all have triggers and wounds and needs and feelings. And this is just part of being a complex human being. But, I categorize those aspects as shadow self because they're not particularly pleasant to explore. So it does take a little bit of self-compassion and patience to do that excavation work around our shadow self. Self-awareness also includes our love language. There's a beautiful book, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, that talks about these, and knowing these about yourself and about your partner is going to make a huge difference in your relationships. Self-awareness is also knowing your personality types. If you're on the Myers-Briggs scale, or if you follow Enneagram, I have I think 10 different frameworks that I give my clients to explore, because knowing these aspects of ourselves give us greater insight into our tendencies. And that could also even include your astrological sign, if that's something that you adhere to and align with. So self-awareness is the top pillar for having healthy romantic relationships. There are 4 others. Would you let me to just...
Yes, I just, the first one, the self-awareness thing, it makes such perfect sense, because here's the thing. I know in my situation, when I go on a date, it's really easy to be a chameleon, to be malleable, to just be friendly and sure, I'll try that. Yeah, whatever. When maybe I don't want to try that. So it's really just really getting in touch with yourself. So I love that. So yes, please do go on. But I just wanted to acknowledge you and say, yeah, that makes logical sense.
Yeah. And Sheree, you raise a beautiful point, because self-awareness also encompasses our standards, our values, our boundaries. And if those are not something that is crystallized going into a first date, then yeah, it's very easy to become a chameleon, especially if we have the tendency of needing to be liked, of people pleasing. So
Enneagram too.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Right. Okay. I've already talked a little bit about emotional intelligence, but I single this out as the second pillar because it's so important. Because when we're in relationship with someone, again, we have complex emotions. We have frustration, disappointment. We have expectation. We have desire. And if we're not in tune with those things, then we're not able to communicate what we want. And there's a lot of people out on this planet that walk around believing that our partner should just know how to make us happy, how to make us fulfilled, how to fulfill our needs. And it's just simply not true. In fact, the skill there is communicating what is going on in our inner landscape. And when we're able to express, hey, I'm feeling disconnected. I haven't heard from you in a couple of days, and I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling sad. My goodness, that is when we're with a quality partner who is also aligned with these 5 pillars. That is the key to intimacy, is sharing that we're having these feelings and communicating what we need.
Cool. Yeah, it's amazing. And it's hard to do sometimes. It's hard to do, particularly early in a relationship, when you're well, am I going to sound needy if I say that?
Yeah.
But if it's authentic, I think you're probably well advised to do it.
Yeah, totally. And that leads us into these next two pillars. The third pillar, two pieces, empathy and compassion. Empathy and compassion is so needed on this planet right now. I think the opposite of empathy and compassion is division. And so when I think of empathy and compassion, I'm thinking of, how do I relate with somebody as if that were me? How do I see someone else as a perfectly imperfect, vulnerable, yet beautifully strong human being? How do I look at them and say, you've had struggle in your life just like me. You have had challenges in your life just like me. You have had heartbreak in your life just like me. So there's this process of humanizing the other person and offering this care and love for their experience, for their suffering. And this allows us to extend benefit of the doubt. This allows us giving somebody else grace. It offers us the sacred pause before having an emotional reaction, a knee-jerk reaction that can create more division in our relationship. And there are lots of different ways to cultivate empathy and compassion. It's not a light switch that we turn on. It's definitely a muscle that we build up and that we practice. One of my mantras is that love is a practice. There's no getting it right. There's no getting it wrong. I mean, some days we may do better than other days, but I don't necessarily believe in failing in love, because every unfortunate or uncomfortable experience in love is ripe with gold of lessons and blessings. I have a client that I'm working with who met up with a guy who came in from out of state to meet up with her. They had this great date. They had this steamy makeout session. And all of a sudden he's saying, gosh, I wish there was someplace more private we could go instead of a hotel parking lot. And she said, she's thinking, wow, he wants to hook up with me. I'm not ready for that. And all of that is to say is they parted ways, and he's never going to see her again, unfortunately. But there was this disconnect between what he wanted, what he was expecting, which was in fact a booty call, and what she was expecting. Anyway, it was a heartbreaking moment, but at the same time, that experience gave her so much information about how to show up in the future, like how she needs to tweak her online dating profile, what she needs to communicate in advance, what she needs to confirm, how she needs to deal and respond to a statement that he said like that. Right. So I'm talking about empathy and compassion, and that also extends to ourselves. So if we have an experience like that, where, gosh, man, I should have seen this coming, or like, how could I have been so blind? We're reinforcing this punishing relationship with ourselves. And so empathy and compassion not only extends to the other people that we're relating with, but to ourselves for being on this journey of love that has no specific hard, fast rules. It's not so black and white. There's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of creativity involved, and it's a learning curve. If we were sitting down and I was teaching you how to play piano, and you were practicing your piano scales or your lessons, in between our formal lessons, and you messed up, like, would you sit there berating yourself that you hit the wrong key or that you did it wrong? I mean, That's just a very easy correlation, but I extend that same benefit of the doubt and that same grace to our own experience on the journey.
Cool. What's number 4?
Number 4 is vulnerability. And as I say that word, I want to introduce the concept of the butt pucker zone. I know it's fun to say, it's not fun to be in though. And a lot of times this idea of vulnerability puts people squarely in, again, what I call the butt pucker zone. So the butt pucker zone, as you might imagine, is this uncomfortable place on the journey of growth. where you're past the point of not knowing what you don't know. Okay. Now you're in this place of knowing that you have to do something or say something, show up differently. You've got to make a change, and you're aware of what that change is, but you haven't done it yet. So it's that uncomfortable space between knowing what you have to do and actually taking the action. That is the butt pucker zone. There's a saying that is, life begins on the other side of your comfort zone, right?
Yep.
Well, the butt pucker zone is right before that. And like I said, vulnerability puts people squarely in that zone because, you're taking a risk. You're putting yourself out there, whether that is, putting yourself out there in an online dating situation, whether that's sharing your feelings and your needs, sharing a boundary. Hey, it sounds really great to go somewhere and carry on the steamy makeout session in a hotel room, but I'm not ready for that. I love the idea. Can we rain check? I mean, it's so vulnerable to say that.
Yep.
So vulnerability, I believe, is really only possible after we build that muscle of the third step of empathy and compassion. Because once we have empathy and compassion for ourselves, for others, then we can start to have vulnerability because we understand how difficult it is. I working with another client, she's really reluctant to just walk right up to a handsome gentleman in real life and strike up a conversation. She can do it, no problem, with women, but she's really afraid of being rejected when doing that with men. But when we flip the table and we consider, okay, well, do you imagine that men are just as afraid of rejection as women are? I mean, maybe a little bit less because there is some biological programming for them to pursue. But would men are not pursuing every single attractive female that they see in real life, because if they did, that is all that they would be spending their time doing, because they're so visual. They find all women beautiful, many beautiful women, and the only reason why they don't do that is because of the fear of rejection. Right. So if we can have this empathy and compassion that, yes, the opposite sex or whomever that we are trying to attract also experiences the fear of rejection, then we can have empathy. We can have compassion for their vulnerability just as much as our own. So vulnerability is this fourth pillar of having healthy, lasting relationship.
And number 5.
Yeah. Number 5 is probably one of my favorites. Not that I don't love, I love all of these, but number 5 is skillful communication. When we have poor communication in relationship, that is maybe number 2 division causing element. To put it in the most simplest terms, unskillful communication can put our partner on the defensive and, create this adversarial dynamic in a relationship. But what we want is we want to create connection. We want to create unity. We want to create mutual understanding. And so skillful communication is so important. And one of the things the audience can practice right away is just recognizing, again, going through sort of this workflow, if we're having complex emotions, we're feeling frustrated, we're feeling disappointed, we're feeling taken advantage of, as an example. That's a messenger that a need is not being met. What is the need? The need is for respect. The need is for understanding. The need is for, something along those lines. Then once we have those feelings and those needs identified, then we can communicate that we're having this experience. Because more often than not, we're having this experience, we're feeling frustrated, a need for respect is not being met. And then what do we say? What's wrong with you? Why can't you keep a date? Why can't you this? Why can't you that? And we're directing all that energy at you instead of sharing what's happening for us. So a simple practice is just recognizing when we're using you statements versus when we're saying I statements. You statements are going to create that division, especially with someone who is not self-aware, someone who's not grounded. When we're communicating from I statements, we're at least giving ourselves the best opportunity to create connection in that dialogue.
In listening to these, particularly this last one, I can see where you say they're universal and they apply to really all relationships. And even that last one, even in the employment situation, if your boss asks you to do something and you're kind of like, well, I actually kind of had this weekend carved out for my kid's graduation, whatever it is, to be able to say what the reason is and to own it and to claim it. So I appreciate these, and these all make sense. So what about women that are in relationships now? Because this is great advice for those that are seeking them, but it's also good for those that are in them. What about a woman who's in a relationship now and it's about 80% right? Like she's got a relationship with a guy and he's good. He's good.
Mm-hmm.
But she's not saying great.
Yeah.
What do we do?
That's a great question. Well, I think the first step is to really identify what's in the gap. And if the gap is maneuverable or fixed. And so something that is maneuverable is a behavior or something that, again, could be communicated, expressed as a desire. So, for example, I use this example all the time. I love it. My husband and I share our household responsibilities. And we've got just this nice flow. And he, I load the dishwasher at night and run it. And then in the morning, he unpacks it because he wakes up before I do. But if he doesn't unload the dishwasher, it kind of puts a hiccup in my morning, because now all of a sudden I have to take 10 extra minutes to unload the dishwasher. So, and when he doesn't do it, I feel a little hijacked. I feel a little disrespected. So it's on me to communicate, hey, babe, listen, I feel a little disrespected and I feel inconvenienced when the dishwasher isn't unloaded in the morning. And I really need you to pitch in and help me out and do this. Shooting from the hip. This wouldn't be the exact conversation. Right. Would you be willing to do that? So that's something that can be communicated. That's an alterable behavior. That is something maneuverable. Now, something that's fixed, an example of something that's fixed is going to be a discrepancy in your values. So if you are working with if you have a partner who is a serial entrepreneur and they are running 5 businesses and they're working 80 hours a week, and that is their top priority above the relationship, that's probably not going to change in the span of time that you're in the relationship. Now, of course, you can certainly apply the formula of identifying your feelings, identifying your needs, using skillful communication to express what you desire. But if you're, if this person has come to you with this kind of lifestyle, then it's very unlikely that that's going to change.
Sure. It's a leopard and you're asking them to not be a leopard and not have spots. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So that's values, and lifestyle would be the second thing that is not necessarily maneuverable. It's a little bit more fixed. I have a client who she just had a date cancel on her because the guy that she was relating with online he had this realization that he wants to singularly date women who have a passion for skiing. He's a ski bum. He skis 4 or 5 days out of the week in season, organizes his work life around that. And it's very important to him to have a woman who shares that lifestyle. She doesn't share that lifestyle, which is great. So he self-selected out. But within the container of relationship, if you start to recognize that, okay, my partner is a night owl and stays up all hours of the night. I'm a morning person. I'm up at 5 a.m. when he's going to bed. This is kind of the way that it always has been, and it might always will be. That's a lifestyle difference. So that is something that is less maneuverable. It's fixed. So that would be the very first step in determining if an 80% relationship has the potential of closing that gap and being a win-win, 100% out of the park relationship, or something that should be reconsidered.
Speak to the woman who's worried about losing herself in a relationship yet again, like she may surrender herself and she's worried about that happening.
Yeah. Oh, I love her. I love her because that was my path and still is. Our wounds, our patterns, relational patterns. I wish that I had better news, but they are with us for life. It doesn't matter what partner you're with because these girls are just going to keep on popping up and knocking on your door and pulling you into your default way of being. So it's vital that the woman who loses herself in relationship, who sacrifices her desires for love, gets with the program. And the program that I'm talking about is self-awareness, recognizing when there is a need that she's overriding. I'll give you a great example of this from my relationship with my husband. We were kind of early on in our relationship. I think we'd been together maybe 3 or 4 years, married for 2. And he was traveling a whole bunch at that time. And we live about 40 minutes from the airport. Obviously, it's so much more convenient when our partner drops us off and picks us up from the airport. My husband, God bless him, love him, loves being at home, loves spending time with me. And he changed his trip so that he would come home a day early to be home and spend time with me. Calls me up, hey, babe, changed my flight. Can you pick me up early from the airport? I immediately seize up and go into freeze mode because I know I've got a self-care date with myself on the calendar for that night. I'm going to get in the hot tub. I'm going to have a beautiful dinner. I'm going to give no Fs. It's just me, myself, and I. And I now am faced with this request from him to pick him up at the airport, which throws a monkey wrench in my plan, which is not a concrete plan. I'm not going out. I'm not meeting up with anybody. I'm not obligated. And now I feel obligated to go pick up my husband from the airport because I know that one of my wounds is a fear of disappointing my partner or inconveniencing him. Rational or not, doesn't even matter. But that is what my fear brain goes to. Oh, don't disappoint my husband. Don't disappoint, don't inconvenience. And so there's this impulse to override my need for self-care, for me time, to go meet his needs. So the woman that sacrifices herself in relationship, who loses herself in relationship, that is a result of multiple micro decisions all along the way of prioritizing everybody else and everything else above herself and her needs. And that could be your partner, that could be your kids, that could be your business, your clients, your pets, household needs. It could be anything. When what you really need is rest, time away, time off, playtime with your girlfriends. You need something else, but instead you're making other people's needs important than your own.
Which really, when you look at it, is circling back to pillar 1 and being self-aware. You're aware, this is my need and this is my default behavior. And these things are at odds with what it is that I want if I want a solid relationship.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Totally. We could even weave all 5 into that request. Hey, I have this impulse to say yes because I have a fear of disappointing you. And, so that's 1 and 2. And then I recognize that it's so much easier for me to come pick you up at the airport. At the same time, I have this commitment with myself. That's 3 and 4. So what I really need is to adhere to my commitment to myself. Would you be willing to catch an Uber? And I will make sure that we get some alone time together the next day. And that's number 5. So we got all 5 of those in that one conversation.
Perfect. I knew you'd hit it out of the park. Bex, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's an absolute pleasure, Sheree. Thank you so much for thinking of me.
I love these talks, don't you? Remember, if you'd like a conversation with a midlife courage coach, I'll always make time for you. I'm Sheree Clark, and I hope to talk with you soon.